everybody, I'm Elizabeth Hines from Total Wellness Health Coaching. Welcome to my kitchen. So we are doing another summer favorite today. We are going to make tomato pie. Tomato pie. This is amazing. You're going to love it unless you hate tomatoes. If you hate tomatoes, then maybe don't watch. But if you love tomatoes, this is a recipe for you. So I have already done a few of the steps because I have shown them to you before, like making our pastry crust. This is a basic almond flour pastry crust. If you're brand new here, my family follows mostly a paleo diet, which is grain-free, completely gluten-free, always, 100% of the time, and mostly grain-free, and mostly dairy-free. We have cheese. This is not a dairy-free recipe. It's what would be called primal, which is the same as paleo, but includes some good quality dairy. So this is my almond flour pastry crust, which I have made in a savory version like this in my chicken pot pie, pigs in blankets, lots of other recipes. I can link those below. And I've made a sweet version for like an apple pie multiple times as well. So I can link those recipes. But to keep this video a little bit shorter, I went ahead and made our crust. Now, this is a lot. You could easily cut this recipe in half. You can cut it in a quarter. In fact, sometimes I have done that when I just wanted some tomato pie for myself, which is not unusual. My husband likes this. It's very good. My children like it. But I love it. Love it. So sometimes I will make it just for myself and cut it down. It's very good leftover. It's best if you heat it up in the oven, but I usually don't. I just heat it up in the microwave. You could do an air fryer because, you know, it's that crispy crust and your melty cheese. So anyway, it does make a lot, but if you have a big family, then you're all set. Or if you just love it and you want leftovers, then you're going to have leftovers. But because it's fresh tomatoes, this is not a great one to freeze. However, if you wanted to maybe cut this recipe down and not make, you know, this is a full, or it's actually called a half sheet pan, but we're making that full size. You could go ahead and make the whole crust, and you can refrigerate the crust for a few days. You can actually freeze it too. You know, anytime you freeze something, it loses a little bit of its quality, except ice cream, of course. But you can freeze dough and, like I said, refrigerate it for a while. So if you want to make another one fresh, you know, next week, or maybe you want to make a chicken pot pie or something. Anyway, this is very flexible, but I want a lot of tomato pie, so I'm making the full recipe. To make this easier on myself, I'm just rolling out my crust on my parchment, and I'm going to just slide it onto my baking tray, and it will be super easy. I try not to put a whole bunch of extra starch on. This is arrowroot starch in my canister. It's fine. We're not going for low carb or anything around here, but you just don't want excess starch, you know, if you don't need it. And this dough, it doesn't usually need a whole lot. It kind of depends on the weather, how warm it is in your kitchen. But you just want to roll this out, basically the full size of your parchment, and then I'm going to get it on my sheet pan, and I'll kind of make a little edge. This is like a rustic tart. It's not fancy, but it tastes amazing. If you have been around my kitchen for a while, you know I'm not really a fancy cook. I just like to cook things that taste really good. So just, and if it breaks a little bit when you do that, it's totally not the end of the world. So I'm just going to finish rolling this out. I want to give myself a little something to hold on to so I didn't roll it all the way to the edge. So just kind of finish with your fingers, kind of push it up the edge a little bit. That one's a little too far up the edge. We don't want it falling into the oven, letting the oven eat our delicious crust. No, no, no. We want it for ourselves. So my oven's on 375. I actually have some quiche in the oven. That's one of the things I talk about when I give people tips on how to cook from scratch. If you're gonna manage your health with diet and lifestyle, it's just a lot more cooking than I think most people are used to. And so I say when you're in the kitchen, you're already like in the mode of cooking. You're doing dishes and you're getting stuff out and you're making a mess. Just go ahead and make something else. So I made my husband this egg casserole, and I make a 9x13 of it, and then he cuts it himself, because he's the one that eats it. He cuts it into the size that he wants, the portion size he wants, and then we put it in the freezer and he eats it. It gets about a week and a half out of one batch. Okay, so I'm going to quit messing with this. As you can see, it's rough. It's not beautiful, but it's pretty evenly rolled out. So I'm going to take my fork with pretty sharp tines and just make holes all over, because I don't want my crust really puffy. And I'm going to do what's called par baking my crust, which just means baking it part of the way. So we're going to bake it part of the way. I'm going to make my cheese mixture. We're going to put that on the crust. Then we're going to put the tomatoes on. We're going to put some more cheese on top. And then we're going to eat it. Okay, in the oven. Okay, so step one was the crust. So we have that in the oven. Step two is our filling, for lack of a better word, like the cheesy part. So we need 1 large egg and half a cup of mayonnaise. Yes. I think my half a cup is dirty, so we'll use the quarter of a cup. How are y'all doing? I hope your summer is going really well. Let me know if you are taking a fun trip. Did you start a garden this year? Just like, what's going on? It's been kind of a crazy year. If you have school-age children, maybe your school year was a little wacky. I hope things are going to be back to normal for the fall for you. That was the timer for the eggs, which are not done. So we'll leave them in. I have a garden video. It'll probably go up before this. But I did them real consistently once a month throughout the year. And people seem to enjoy that, just to kind of see what was going on, what was growing in our southern garden all through the year. We, thankfully, in North Carolina, we can garden most of the year, so that's great. Okay, let's see, what do I need? I need a half a teaspoon and a full teaspoon. So we have our egg and our mayonnaise, and I'm gonna whisk this together with my spices, and then I'm gonna fold in my cheese, which we'll talk about the cheese in just a minute. I will have this recipe down below. You can just go down to the notes section and see the recipe there. I have a half a teaspoon of onion powder. But also, if you go to my website, totalwellnesshealthcoaching.com, you can, which is my health coaching business website, but I have added a recipe, like a recipe component, like my old recipe blog, so that you can, oh my goodness, what is going on with my brain? So that you can print off the recipe. So if you know how if you go to a recipe blog, they usually have a little printer icon. You can click that and it'll give you a nice printable form of the recipe. You're not going to get that from the notes section on YouTube, but you can get that if you go to my website and print it off there. My black pepper that I bought from, it's like the lid is glued on, which is super frustrating. And so I can't get it off. So I'm ending up with a lot more black pepper in my recipes than I really wanted. So that's to be a quarter of a teaspoon of black pepper. I need to get my muscly husband and son on that. So 2 teaspoons of dried basil. Yes. And 2 teaspoons of dried oregano. So usually you double it if you want to use fresh. If you have a nice herb garden, you would use 4 instead of 2 teaspoons of each, or a tablespoon plus a teaspoon. Do you know that 3 teaspoons equals a tablespoon? Okay, and then 2 teaspoons of dried mustard, which is a lot of spices, herbs and spices, but that's part of why it's so yummy. So, I'm going to let you in on a secret. These tomatoes that I am using to make this tomato pie are not from my garden because I wanted to get this recipe made and written up and the video made and photographed and everything ready for you in time for your garden tomatoes, which means that I had to make it with grocery store tomatoes. I highly don't recommend it, and I don't mean that to be snobby or perfectionist. I'm not that way in my cooking at all. But if you've ever had a homegrown tomato, you know the difference between a homegrown tomato and a grocery store tomato. There's really no difference at all, or no difference. There's no comparison. It's like a completely different food. It's like the tomatoes you get at the grocery store and the tomatoes you grow in your garden, they don't taste the same at all. So this is way, 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 way better with homegrown tomatoes. Whether you grow them yourself, you get them from a nice, generous neighbor, you get them from your farmer's market, way better with fresh tomatoes. I wouldn't even make this during the winter, honestly. Just don't even bother. You know, you could do this same tart if you really just love it, and you could do all kinds of roasted vegetables. That would actually be delicious. I've not done that before. I've added, I gotta get them out. I actually caramelized some onions ahead of time because I love caramelized onions on this. So I think I'll put some on half. Like roasted squash or something is really good combined with the tomatoes. But you could, if you just love this concept, do this with other veggies other times of the year. But I would only do tomatoes when you can get really good tomatoes. So do as I say, not as I do. I'm using these just to show you. So these are, I don't know, these are like those tomatoes on the vine or whatever. This cutting board is roughly the size of my baking sheet, so I know once I have filled this up that that's about the number of tomatoes that I need. I just wanted to show you how I peel my tomatoes. Not that I'm an expert at it by any means. I'm not a trained chef. I do not have chef knife skills. But I like to use a really thin, sharp little knife. And my grandma taught me you cut towards yourself. Like if I were peeling an apple, I would be doing like this. But with tomatoes, for some reason, I have a really hard time with that. Actually, this one's going okay. Another vote for homegrown tomatoes is that they'll peel easier. Sorry, Grandma. So I just go like this. I just peel them. And this was, I think, 5 of these same little tomatoes that are there already. And it took me like 10 minutes to peel and slice them. However, if you want a faster, more hands-off way, you can put a pot of water on the stove, start it boiling, and take a knife. I take a serrated knife, and on the bottom, just cut a little X right on that little, like that little dot, the little stem end, that blossom end. Not the stem end, the blossom end. And just cut a little cross like that. When your water, it doesn't have to be a full rolling boil, it just has to be simmering. When it comes up to simmer, you just put your tomatoes in, let them go for just a few seconds because you don't want to cook your tomatoes. You just want to loosen the skin. And you'll see it'll start to the skin will start to kind of peel up where you made your X. And take them out. You have to let them cool so you can touch them, which is why I think in the end it's not really saving you a whole lot of time. Then the skins really just peel right off. You don't cut the core out first. You just make that little X on the bottom. And then the skins will sort of slip off all the way up to that stem. And then you just cut around the stem. If I have enough tomatoes come in at the same time for me to can out of my garden, I'll show you that. Because when I'm canning my tomatoes, I do boil them to remove the skins. Because, one, they're getting cooked anyway, so I don't care if they get a little bit mushy. But 2, I'm doing usually a huge quantity. Okay, my wrist is vibrating, which means My 10 minutes are up, so I'm going to check my crust. I'm going to just show it to you so you know. It's not quite ready. It has no browning on it at all. None. And I want a little bit of browning, and then I'll pull it out. So I said 10 to 15. I'm going to put it back in for 5 more. Okay, so to slice a tomato, I always use a serrated knife. It's just easier. I like them sliced like this. Okay? If you are not super confident in your knife skills and you're worried about cutting it safely because they're a little slippery, you can always just lay it face down. It's more stable and slice them this way, and it's totally fine. They're going to get cooked. I like mine about this thick. It's about between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. Now, sometimes you put a raw veggie on a paper towel like this and salt them, and that helps draw out some moisture and sometimes bitterness, depending on the vegetable. Like eggplant, you would do that, or it's recommended. I'm not going to put salt on these. I don't really want to draw the moisture out. I'm just draining any like real excess moisture. So I'm going to clean this up, put my mayonnaise away, and then it'll be about time to get the rest of our pie ready. Okay, while my crust is finishing, here are my caramelized onions that I made maybe 4 or 5 days ago. I used part of them on a pizza, and then I'm going to put the rest on half of my tomato pie. Now, I talked about this being primal, which meant we were including dairy, which we're okay with some good quality dairy, which generally means grass-fed, organic. Sorry, I'm cooking chicken for dinner. This is really dinner time. I'm really cooking. If you can't do any dairy, nutritional yeast is a great substitute. So in this mixture with the mayonnaise and the egg and the spices, you would put in nutritional yeast. 2 to 4 tablespoons. I would just taste it and see what you like. This is, I don't honestly understand what it is. I thought it was just like a natural product, but I'm reading it and this says manufactured. So it's vegan, it's gluten-free, it is dried yeast with a bunch of vitamins in it. Niacin, B6, B12. So it's really something that vegans use a lot for it. It has a real cheesy, nutty flavor, and I like it. Like some people sprinkle it on popcorn. I prefer cheese. I'm just being honest. But if I were in a place with my health where I had to be super careful and not have any dairy for a while, I would for sure be using this nutritional yeast. I mean, that's why I have it, because we use it from time to time. You can make macaroni and cheese with it. You can do a lot of stuff with this, and it really tastes cheesy. So I will link this. This one is from Thrive Market, but you can buy it lots of different places. Okay, so here's my crust. I don't know if you can see that it's just slightly from the overhead camera, just slightly brown around the edges, but just trust me, and you can tell when you look at it that it's not cooked through. You don't want it cooked through because we're about to put it back in the oven with for 20 to 25 minutes, okay? So it's going to be in there for a while. So I just kind of eyeball, divide, and you know what I did? So this is what I have done. I originally made this recipe, so when I'm experimenting with the recipe, I will usually make a half, or a 1/4, I'm not going to make a 3-layer cake. I'm going to make a 1-layer cake. And then when I write it up, I do the full amount. Well, so I have the full amount of crust here, but I still only have half the amount of my cheese mixture, which is fine because what you're going to do, I'll just make some more in a second, but what you do is you spread half of it on your crust. And you just want to be careful not to rip up your crust. It's pretty hardy. I mean, it's made out of almond flour. It's not super, super fragile, but just be gentle. And it will kind of start to melt. So you saw me just kind of plunk it down on my crust, but as I work with it, it's melting a little bit, and so it gets a little bit easier to spread. You know what? I didn't think that looked like enough, but I trusted myself. Okay, I might want to end up putting on a few more, slicing a few more tomatoes too. So I know this was kind of funny the way I'm doing this, but I have these like the little ones, and so I want to kind of fit those in between my bigger slices. Do you know what I mean? Of course, that looks pretty. So then I kind of fill in here. And if I need more, I have 2 more in the windowsill, so I can easily peel and slice those. It's going to come out just about perfect. Here we go. All right, so this was kind of a strong onion. Caramelizing them really sweetens them up, mellows them out. However, when they're super duper strong, sometimes there's only so much mellowing you can do. So I'm only going to put them on half. And I don't add any sugar to my caramelized onions. I know some people do, but I don't. No judgment, but I don't. So it's just whatever natural sweetness was in those onions. Okay, so we're going to pause this. I'm going to mix up the rest of the cheese mixture and be right back. Okie dokie, thanks for your patience. I just whipped up a little bit more of the cheese. Okay, I will have the correct measurements for you down below. So here, I tend to use my hands because I can't really spread this on top of the tomatoes very easily. So I just grab it and I start, this is called like dotting. You ever see that like in an old recipe? I don't think people use that term as much anymore, but that's what my mom, my grandma would always say, kind of dot the top. Just plop it around, okay, until you've used it up. And try to put it out evenly. But it's cheese, right? It's cheese and egg and mayonnaise. For you keto people, this is really a good keto recipe. Don't worry about doing it perfectly because it's going to melt, right? So just do your best and let the oven do the rest. Do your best, let the oven do the rest. Okay, you might want a little more salt, a little more pepper, a little more garlic, whatever. You make it to your taste. This is the way that I like it. My family likes it. But I love to like finish my dish with some fresh grated Himalayan sea salt, so I'll probably do that with mine. But this will be really well seasoned like it is. So I have to wash my hands. I'm going to put this back in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. Do you see it? Do you see how pretty it is? It is, the crust is just perfectly browned. It's not burnt. It is just the perfect brownness for crust. The cheese has that little bit of, like, it's kind of bubbled up and browned a little bit. It's so pretty, and I cannot wait to dig into it. But anything that has a lot of liquid in it is going to be super, super hot. You know how, like, if you're simmering soup all day on the stove and then it's time to eat dinner, everybody's like, oh, we can't eat it for 15 minutes because it's so hot. Tomatoes have a lot of water in them, and so they are super, super hot. And so I don't even want to cut it for a couple minutes. So I'm going to go photograph this so I have a nice picture for the website, and then I will cut into it and we'll taste it. Okay, so isn't it beautiful? Okay, this is like good serving size for a normal person. I will probably eat 2 or 3 times that amount. All I made tonight was some chicken thighs that have been baking in the oven with salt and pepper. And then I plan to eat that and a whole bunch of this. But you could also serve this to a crowd. This would be great for like a summer potluck. People will be like, oh my goodness, wow. And it's gluten free. It's grain free. So we have our crust that is not soggy. I'm telling you, it took me years to get my paleo pie crust. And I didn't give it away for a long time because it was like the holy grail of paleo recipes. But it's so good I wanted to share it. So I have shared it with you. It's really the perfect crust in my opinion. It tastes good. It holds up well. And then we have a layer of the cheese. We have the tomatoes. My piece I got with the caramelized onions. And a little more cheese on top. All those yummy herbs, the oregano and the, what's that other one? The basil. It's so good. And these are not even garden tomatoes. Just, you can only imagine how yummy it's gonna be when my tomatoes come in. So I hope you have some great tomatoes in your garden, or maybe your neighbor's garden, which would be even better. And you make this tomato pie. And if you do, please let me know how it goes. Ask any questions down in the comments. I would love to help you in any way that I can. And I hope you're doing really well, having a great summer. And I will see you back here next week with another great summer recipe. Have a great day, everybody.